to thine own self be true. Many times people think start low and then increase your prices. That's penetrating the market. You keep them through the customer experience. As you get more experience, then you increase your prices. I had to redefine failure. I had to reframe it. I say either I will win or be successful, I will learn, or I will transform. When I came out of my corporate life, and like everybody, life happens. And so when I started my business, I realized now I had some really faulty thinking.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm going to be your host today, and we have Fran Strickland in the studio. How are you, ma'am?
Hi, Rick. How are you? I'm fantastic.
I love fantastic. That always makes for a good show. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. You know, today I want to talk about one of the things that I've talked to a number of folks about is business, you know, and being an entrepreneur, but parts of that faith journey that goes along with that. So what I would love to do is just kind of start with your background, who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do, and then we can get into some more of the good stuff, let's call it.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say hello to your audience. It is really my pleasure to be with them and to be with you. And I'm just believing that, you know, there'll be something that will be said that'll make a difference. If it's only for one person, then I've met my purpose in this day. So it's really my privilege. It really is a privilege for me. So what do? I help small and medium-sized businesses, their owners, their CXOs, find those places in their business where they're losing time, effort, and money, many times unaware. And how I do that is I have a framework of structure, leadership, and flow. And that flow is all about all of those things that happen in the business that can affect how cash moves in and out of that business. So in those three elements, I'm able to help them find those activities, decisions, behaviors, ways of thinking that really undermines their ability to reach predictable profitability. Because when you get to predictable profitability, that's when you can reinvest in the business, you can grow the business, you can take care of the important things if you have a team for the people in your organization, and also pay yourself so you can have the lifestyle and live the purpose that you intend to live.
I love that. I love that. What are typical obstacles you see with founders, with companies that prevent them from having that predictable revenue?
A variety of things can happen. In some cases, when they get started, they do not have the right elements in place. I'm working with someone right now where she lacks clarity around her ideal customer, who she wants to serve, you know, what she would do for them, the value that she would create for them, how she would do it, where she would do it. These are fundamental elements of establishing a business, knowing what you're going to bring that's uniquely you to your clients. The other thing is sometimes a personal habit where a person just doesn't want to sell, or they are afraid to sell, or they don't have the skill to sell. Or they may lack basic knowledge around the things that would attract clients to them. Okay. And get them and you don't convince anybody to buy your product, but basically help guide them to a point where they can see what you have to offer is a no-brainer to accept, to really buy into. And then there are things like pricing strategy, you know, underpricing. It can be things like terms where there is a mismatch And when you have income coming in and when you have other things that are going to be drawing off of that income, this is especially true. Like, for example, when I first started, I had a client who had a net 40 payment to its vendors. Okay. Well, I think we all know that most people, when we have expenses, we pay them on a 30-day window, right? The first of the month, no later than the 10th. And you
Yeah.
have a 45-day, period before you get your money. So, there was some really tough times. And so I had a reserve. But, when you're floating cash to cover those kinds of gaps, you quickly have no reserve and it can really get you behind the eight ball. And to remember also, it's important to have cash flow before you can get to profitability. Okay. And it's also important to understand what are the elements, the financial elements of determining things like margin and profits, and understanding those basic financial terms are important. So lack of understanding of those terms, the things that drive those activities like overhead costs versus the cost of what goes into that, producing that product or that service. All of those misunderstood or poorly organized or structured or not monitored can create those kinds of leaks that really siphon off the financial stability of the.
Mm, mm, mm. Let's go back to ICP. Let's go back to the ideal customer profile who we're selling what to. Thinking about small businesses, and I mean, if we're talking about a corporation, we've got that we can build those avatars. We can see who's buying from us. We've got that power. As a smaller company, though, I mean, how do you? What are the steps, or how do you guide people through identifying what their ICP is?
Well, I have a template because I had to document how I do it because at first it was just kind of intuitive where you sit someone down and I actually used to take them through a process. I'd
Hmm.
have them close their eyes and say, who's standing in front of you?
Mm,
What are they doing? What do they look like? What kind of problems do they have? When they work with you, how will they feel? How will they look? What will their experience be like? And actually going through systematically those questions about whomever they're thinking about doing a service for. So I'll go back to the example that the person I'm working with now. Today, I actually just say, okay, we've talked around and about. She had this very, how I describe as kind of abstract way. She talked about empowering people, helping them thrive, et cetera, et cetera. And those are nice outcomes, but not necessarily things that a business can understand. They need to have some kind of quantitative impact, right?
right.
So what I had to get her to do is to translate this vision or, somewhat intangible, but meaningful, not that it wasn't meaningful. It was intangible in order to get someone to understand what she did, to translate that into a variety of outcomes that were more concrete.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Good.
So the first thing is to be clear on what it is that you want to deliver, right? And then get them to tune in to that person, that business, and actually have them transport themselves into the experience of interacting with them. And it has nothing to do with logic. It really is an emotional experience. Now, that's the technique that I use. Some people may use a more logical conversation. There is a conversation like that, but it's really important because actually selling is emotional.
Yeah. Yeah.
People's decisions to buy are emotional. We use logic to justify that emotional decision we just made.
For sure. For sure. One of the conversations I see that people have is they say, okay, I want to make a certain revenue. I want to make a certain income amount,
Mhm.
and they try to build their ITP from that. It's just
Mm.
like, okay, I'm going to charge $300 an hour. So I'm going to charge, X number of dollars per month for a client to go through, XYZ process. And then they kind of reverse engineer, what that needs to look like. Oh, they'll have, X amount of, disposable income and da da da. How does that fit into the model that you just described?
Okay.
Where you came from more of a almost like a heart center, where you come from an intuitive, this is who I'm innately drawn to, who's innately drawn to me, is kind of what I gathered, versus looking at it from a revenue perspective. This is the person that can afford the type of work that I'm offering.
Okay. Well, it's a little bit of that, but you know, what I come down to and what I had to learn is that people will pay for what's important to them. Okay? They'll figure out a way to get it. I'll just put it that way. And so what I try to focus on and get people who are working with me to focus on what is the value that they are creating for that individual, for their ideal client.
Hmm.
Okay. And that is a value conversation. And as part of determining that value, when you're talking about pricing, is what does your time mean? What do you help your client avoid having to do for the time they spend with you? So, take, for example, when I talk about my offer, I built my understanding of what I do over more than 30 years of practical, hard earned experience, sitting at the feet of some premier, thought leaders, the McKinseys, the BCGs, and learning, from working with people like that, from being with C-suite executives, working with all levels of the organization and doing transformation, all of that. So I get to bring that experience and those skills with me to that conversation. Someone who doesn't have that kind of experience, I have just relieved them of having to work or find somebody to teach them or to go to school to get that information from anywhere from 10 to 20 years. Okay. I also know that when someone works with me one to one, they are just not getting what I know and my skills. They're getting who I am as a human being. And I know that when I approach someone and I'm working with them, that I'm bringing to them spirit, I'm bringing to them integrity, and I'm bringing to them something that they won't find in anybody else because nobody can do me like I do. And I put a number on that.
Right.
Now, I would tell anyone that it's important to have an objective, having a financial objective month to month and breaking that down into the number of clients you might have, depending upon the different offers that you have, is an important way to plan your business because you can take it, say, whoever comes along, I'm going to I'm going to have that person, I'm going to do business with them. Okay. And sometimes you may have people come and, all money is not good money because you overinvest yourself. And by the time you overinvest yourself, what was, say, 300 an hour now is something like 50 an hour. Okay. So, to have a number and say, okay, I've got these offers and I'm basing these offers on the value that I bring. I'm basing it on the cost of finding people to do it. I'm taking in consideration the cost of me producing whatever I produce, and I'm going to give a price. And I say I may want to have a 20% margin. Most coaching, the margin is even higher than that, 50, 60, 70%. Okay, because you're basically using your brain. But for some work, it is a number of additives that you have to put in. So that's how you come up with your pricing. And then when you're setting your goals on a monthly basis, you will have, for example, I want to have 3 customers at this offer and 2 customers at this offer level and 5 at this offer level. And that will tell you how much you need to generate in revenue to meet whatever number you've set. So it's a little bit of, as you say, hardcore setting an objective in terms of the return you want to get, what you want to bring in, but it's also about the value that you create for them and really how you are actually improving that client's position given what you're bringing to the table.
Mm. I love the way you describe the value that you bring to the table. You know, you've got 30 years of experience, you know, sitting at the feet of, you know, people that were, you know, absolutely phenomenal, you know, in business. They give you great models and that sort of thing. How do you work with your clients in terms of helping them understand the value that they're bringing? What I found with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of, you know, younger entrepreneur, you know, people are getting into business, they tend to undervalue, you know, what they're bringing to the table. How do you kind of walk them through that process so that, you know, A, you know, they're charging the right amount, but B, they're also confident when they're going out to sell, you know, what it is that they're offering?
Yes, and that is a common that's an opportunity because many times people think start low and then increase your prices later. Okay. That's not a bad strategy. That's what you call penetrating the market when you have an entry point where you go in, you want to attract clients, you keep them through the customer experience, you know, what it's like to work with you that differentiates you. And then as you get more experience, and you actually expand upon what you're doing and you add different elements as you get more insight, then you increase your prices. That's not a bad strategy. But when the strategy to start low is because you just can't imagine why you would ask somebody to pay you $500 for an hour work of analysis, because you just wow, you know, that's just asking too much. That's where it becomes problematic. That's
Right.
where it steals from you. And what I do is I actually walked him through very much what I just said about myself. Is, you know, we talk about how would a person be different for having spent that time with you? What are the things that you may have acquired in your experience or in your education or wherever you have frequented to build your expertise that you're bringing that someone else may not know? In some cases, I met someone who was doing business consulting and she had worked with some of the biggest names in the industry that were doing mindset and business. Tony Robbins, Jack Canfield, people like that, right?
Wow.
And and then when I spent time with her, what I discovered is that she was continually pursuing people that because she felt like she had an obligation to help people, and she could not get in her mind that she was worthy of charging more for her services. And so I had to help her to see. I say, if a person doesn't work with you today, what have you discovered that they're normally charging? And she would talk about people charging 50 an hour for coaching, etc. And I said, now, when you work with them and you help them to understand how to set up their business, how to communicate about their business and the value they bring, what happens to them? And she says, well, they go out and they start charging 200 an hour, 300 an hour, and they start making money. I said, okay, that's what you help them to discover in themselves. So if you can help that happen for other people, is that not worth something? So sometimes it's helping, is holding up the mirror so that they can see the difference that they make.
I love that. I love that. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Kind of, you're kind of alluding to value-based pricing. That's what I'm taking from from this conversation. See, I think one of the things that I've experienced in value-based pricing is like working with a company, and I know, you know, 2, 3 years down the road, they're going to see extraordinary results, you know, from the work that we do. And sometimes that conversation is difficult, you know, for a founder. I mean, how do you recommend people, you know, going in confidently with their pricing? How do you recommend people really reconcile, tell that story to their prospect in a way that the prospect is going to go, you know what? I see what you're talking about. Yeah, I need to do this. I want to do this. This is going to take my business on a different trajectory.
First of all, I always tell people nobody cares about your credentials or anything else unless you're going to do heart surgery. Okay.
That
Right?
part.
That's right. Now, if you're going to have that kind of situation, people care. But for the most part, when we're talking about consulting with business owners, there is an important element. One is what you do, your product or your service. And the other thing is you are also offering safety. You're selling safety. Now, what does that mean? That means that the person is going to be pretty confident that you will be able to execute what you're saying that you can execute. Okay. The other thing is that you are in it. You heard this before. You're in it to win it with them. They are not a paycheck. They are not a transaction. They are people that you feel an investment in their success. It's important to you that they are successful and that you have the integrity to challenge faulty logic and the things that's holding them back. Because they're not paying you to be nice, they're paying you to help them get to where they want to be. That's fundamental. Now, when you start that conversation, you must connect emotionally first. And you connect emotionally by getting a clear understanding of their suffering. They call them pain points. How are they suffering? And how will they continue to suffer if they don't take care of this issue and make it visceral for them? You're not being mean. What you're doing is elevating their awareness to what they're really experiencing because they have the ability to compartmentalize pain
Mm-hmm.
and to make
Mm-hmm.
excuses for it. And so many clients will say, I can't afford that. And you also have heard people say, but you cannot afford not to,
Mm-hmm.
because if you don't take care of it today, what do you think will be the result a year from now? If this is where you are now, and if this is what you've done. So that conversation, after you've built that initial rapport, because you've taken the time to learn something about them, maybe you've had a prior conversation. You're meeting, maybe it's a Zoom, and you have that kind of rapport building, and then you start asking them, tell me what's going well. Now, why do I like to start with what's going well? Because most of the time people will tell you what's not going well, even if you ask the question, okay? But it gives them a chance to open up and just listen, make notes. Consider not jumping ahead saying, okay, now this is how I'll solve the problem, but just really hear them out because so many people never get seen, heard, and understood. Basic need. Help them feel that they are seen, heard, and understood. Okay. And then, as you're making those notes, you have already done the work on your offer. Now, what does that mean? That, write down 4 to 5 values that you create for people when they work with you. And then write out how you deliver that to them. So you have that in the back of your mind. You do not have the details of how it's done, but you have the outcome. What will they get by working with you, and how do you bring that to them? Okay. So when they have given you all this information that you've taken note of, and then you start to speak back to them, you're not saying, well, this is what I do. And, I have my degree from this and it's all about you. You
Yeah.
said, I understand you, and I understand that you've said X about your business. This is really hard. And within, in our offer, we do X, so we can solve that problem for you. So it is really demonstrating in that conversation how what you do solves their problem. That is key. If you do not do that, they will never feel like you're the person for them. But
Right.
even before you get to that part of the conversation is they need to feel seen, heard, and understood, and they need to feel safe.
I love that. I love that. I love that. One of the things I see in entrepreneurs just in general is, I look at an economy like this, I look at, really the economy rolling forward from COVID, in particular, and how things have been very challenging. The rose-colored glasses are off. We're doing a lot of pivoting in these times. How do you help entrepreneurs? And what I believe happens is, we start to lose hope. We start to forget why we're here. We forget those the creativity that we brought to originally serve the market. How do you help folks get out of that hole, or what do you recommend to folks when they're really, really struggling, with the day to day? I mean, it's not like, they can close their business and get a job tomorrow or something like that. I mean, they're in here and they've got to do this thing, figure out how to keep going.
Yes. Now that is probably the most difficult thing that I think that most entrepreneurs face. Sometimes, people start a business, they already have kind of a ready-made clientele because they have an old organization, or they have people say, "Yeah, when you hang up a shingle, come to me," and they're right there.
Hmm.
Sometimes you have that, and then you go through a dry spell, and you don't have it. What I try to instill in my clients is what I call, I don't even want to use the term resilience. I call it a believing, because in my own life, I fundamentally believe that when I have a way of doing things and it's well conceived, when I mean well conceived, it's well conceived around solid values with the right intentions, that things always work out. They don't always work out exactly the way you envision it, but things do work out. And actually, I ask them to look not at their business so much, depending upon what's happening in their business, but look at other aspects of their life, other situations where they have felt their backs were against the wall, and look at them now. Because most of us have some legacy of success in some area of our lives where we can look back and say, how I got over. To teach ourselves and remind ourselves things do work out.
How does if it does, I mean, how does your faith, do you have that conversation about your faith as well as part of that belief conversation, or is that something that you keep kind of separate, or how does that work?
It depends on the individual. I've had some clients where we have prayed before we did our work together. And what usually happens, it kind of surfaces in a conversation, and people discover that you're a person of faith, they're a person of faith, and you'll have an exchange and you open up. And usually when that kind of situation comes up, I ask them, would they be blessed to pray before we start?
Hmm. Hmm.
In some instances, it's very private and people don't want to talk about that. What I've been finding in the last several months is I have had quite almost an avalanche of people from the faith community coming into my space. And I don't look for signs, but I do believe there's a reason why that's happening. Okay. So sometimes it's, for some people it's mindset.
Hmm.
Okay. So some people, they want scripture. They just want hard, fast scripture.
Yeah.
They want to have stories of deliverance. And so it's very unique to the individual. I wrote a book that was about deliverance and avoiding crises for that reason. I call it my first grade book. It's like see Jane run, see Jack jump, see Jack run.
Yeah.
But I wrote that book because there were so many instances in my life where my back was against the wall and things worked out. And so I try to call that to their remembrance. And to the extent that I have visibility of their faith and where they are in their faith and what may resonate with them, storytelling, scripture, then I just kind of believe to step into that space.
How's faith impacted the growth of your business?
Wow. Now this makes me misty eyed.
I think.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me misty-eyed because I had a vision for when I came out of my corporate life. I came out very well in alignment with that vision and with my planning. And like everybody, life happens. Okay, things come up, plans that you have for one thing, just, you have to redirect. You have to handle different things. And so as a consequence, I actually, when I started my business, I realized now I had some really faulty thinking because I wanted to hide. I was not going to sell anything. I was just going to attract my clients. And, I just had this euphemistic kind of view of running a business. It was actually a hobby. And so I had to learn how to be a business owner. And generally speaking, on an average, it will take anywhere between a year to 2 years to try to start getting some income. And you may not necessarily get the level of income that you can be 100% relying on the income from that business. And
Right.
so it helps if you have put aside, you have reserves to support that, or if you can have reserves or say a line of credit to support your business expenses so that you keep your finances separate. You have your living expenses and then you have your business expenses. I shoot bootstrap, so I funded my business and everything out of my own savings. Okay.
Mhm.
And what I did is I actually had some tiers of activity that I could do along. So when I left my corporate role, that was a transition because it was in COVID and basically my role was eliminated. It was eliminated 6 months ahead of when I knew that it was going away. But I knew it was going away, so I started making plans. But I still had 6 months of time when I wasn't employed that I had to cover that time. And I'm living here in Switzerland, and I knew I needed to downside my expenses, for example. And it was a rule here that if you left and canceled your lease before the time, you had to either find someone to move into your unit or you had to pay that rent, even if you moved somewhere else. So one time I was paying two rents at the same time.
Oh.
Okay. So that was significant financial pressure. I wasn't planning to pay two rents at the same time, right? So these are the kinds of things that I say life happens.
Mhm.
But in the course of life happening, I would tell myself that it was such a desire on my heart to do this that I could not have been given that desire to fail.
Yeah.
And that as long as I stayed true to my purpose, the integrity of my heart and my faith, that some way, somehow, I would be successful. And I had to redefine failure. I had to reframe it. Failure is not a vocabulary word that I talk about
Mhm.
because I say either I will win or be successful, I will learn, or I will transform.
I like it.
Okay. So failure only happens when you just quit. Failure doesn't happen when you get to the point and you look and in your understanding and in your purity of heart, you realize I'm being led. This is much more difficult than I believe it should have been given what I've done. And I've been doing small things in a big way consistently, that when that is not meeting with success, then something clicks. And that means you need to change direction. That's not failure. That's wisdom. All of these are not ways of tricking your mind. I say that thinking this way is the way we were intended to think, particularly people of faith. That was where we are taught to believe, that's bringing that into a living form of saying, you know, there is always a way to escape.
Have you ever felt, we'll call it, divinely inspired to
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
what happened?
Wow. I want to give you a real concrete example. I'll tell you what's happening in my business right now because I work on building predictable profitability. I conceived it to be for businesses wherever they are in their life cycle. So at the beginning, in a growth or in a mature stage. I wanted it to be for the whole business and the whole person. So looking at structure, leadership, and flow, and looking at those leaders and their decisions and how they behave. So that's a mouthful. That's a mouthful. But if you would look at my LinkedIn profile, I had my 3 little offers there and it was all laid out and I was feeling really good. And one day I was just sitting there and I was thinking, this doesn't feel right. Okay. I said, it doesn't feel right. And so it kept coming back. And I'm also one of those things that I think about something, it keeps coming back to me. It's telling me you need to do something about it. So it kept coming back to me. And it wasn't that I was being told, don't do it that way. I was being told to talk about it differently. And so one weekend I sat down and I started saying, who do I really want to reach? Who are you, Fran, when you're dealing with people? And I said, I'm a systems thinker. I like relationships and things being connected. I want to solve problems across the organization. And in order to do that, I need to have a framework. So this is how I came up with structure, leadership, and flow.
I like it.
Okay. That made very 3 precise areas and precise activities that can be done. Anybody can do it. Many times those solutions are easy to get to with no additional expense. So then I came up with this framework. And then I went to a unique networking experience. And then the person says, and the reason why you're not attracting your ideal client is your offer.
Mhm.
And and the person said, if you talk to a business that's established and they're making millions, they may not be big, but they're making 5 million, 10 million. And you sat across from them and you go in and you're going to tell them that I'm going to work in your system. I'm going to look at your structure, your leadership and flow. And you're asking for 3,000 or 5,000. They are going to say, you're not for real. You're not serious,
Mhm.
because it is no way you can bring that kind of not complexity, but that kind of order with a 5K offer. And then that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to really put out there who and what I do. And that's been the road that I've been on. Is it scary? Yes, it is scary. But what it did is I feel totally at peace with it.
Mhm.
And so I feel very confident that I am doing the right thing. And it also caused me to think differently about what I'm networking. What am I doing when I'm networking? I'm looking for mutuality. How can I bring a client to someone that's in my tactical business network? I don't need to have 5,000 people in that network. I need to have people that have confidence in what I do. They'll speak about me when I'm not in the room, and I speak about them when they're not in the room.
Mm.
And instead of me looking to them to buy from me. I'm thinking, who can I find and make a sale for that person in front of me? Not for myself, but for them. Yeah. Go
Do
ahead,
you do a lot of
please.
networking?
Do I do,
A lot of
excuse me?
networking? Like, what percent of your time do you spend, like, in business development activities versus producing?
I spend actually, one time I was doing 14 networking events a week,
Wow.
between 30 minutes and an hour. On Tuesdays and Thursdays are my meeting times. So when I go to network events and I follow up and DM and get people on my calendar, and that's when I do it. I do my work for my clients on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And depending upon what that mandate is and where I am, I may do something on Sunday afternoon. And then when I now that I'm changing how I'm doing networking, that's gone from 14 to about 5 consistently.
Okay, and why did you make the change?
I made the change because I started looking at the ROI of those conversations.
Yeah.
And not all networking groups are the same. And I realized that many times, you go into you really can't sell in the room. You should be selling through the room.
Mhm.
But if everyone is in the same place, then they haven't developed their networks either. And so, whereas you may pick up, you may be able to help people and take them along, it really is not a sufficient audience where you can even have the connections that you need to make to reach your ICP.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Are there any other, I don't know, marketing, promotion, sales activities that you do outside of networking?
Yes, of course, things like this, doing podcasts.
Mm,
From time to time, I will do online workshops or webinars. I don't do as much as I used to. In 2023, I did the 2 a month for a while. Now I'm just really selective. I prefer to do them in concert with someone else. And that is true. That's purely kind of a marketing exercise when you do those. The other thing that I'm doing now is I'm doing more what I call outbound. LinkedIn is my platform. And I have sales navigators. So it's a reach out more directly to people from Sales Navigator. It is more of an inquiry about what their needs are and inviting them to respond and ask for certain things rather than just giving it to them. And then, LinkedIn has this thing for projects where people are looking for people to provide certain services. And I will actually propose myself to them.
mm,
And then there's the referrals, and it's really having referral partners, if you
yeah,
will.
yeah, yeah. Cool. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, this has been enlightening. This has been, I'm grateful for all that you've shared. Is there something you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I would just want to reflect back on this questions you have about tough times and getting through those times, because to be discouraged, and particularly now with the kind of negativity that's around us, that discouragement can feel very heavy, very dark. And so what I'd like to say is, to be successful requires two things: to thine own self be true. Whatever it is you're doing, it must be your own voice and not someone else's. There are loads of people, and I'm one of them. I'm a consultant. I'm a strategist. I talk to people. I help them build their business. There are lots of people out there, many of us doing the same thing or similar things. But remember, everyone is not made for everyone, right? You desire, not want, you have no lack. You desire some solid paying customers. You don't need all of them. And to remember, you do have a choice. Sometimes we think we don't have a choice because we get into I need X. But you do have a choice, because all money is not good money, and a poor choice can be as detrimental as having nothing or bypassing until the next opportunity.
Yes, 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 absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen so many times you pass on one deal, it's just like, this isn't right. And then something else shows up that is right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Fran, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I really appreciate you. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It was, again, my privilege, and I do hope that someone heard something that will encourage them, and I send love and light to your audience and to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.